Welcome.
Sorry.
There we go. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
Super good. Super good. I wanted to thank you for joining us for this Orology Forum 2019 throwback. So Gary Getz, our watch expert slash moderator for the 2019 Orology Forums Apocalypse 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you certain parts of what you've said and ask you a question pertaining to that in light of our current situation.
Fabulous.
Yeah, with me so far?
Yes, ma'am.
Great, sir. So let us begin your first statement.
Oh, so for you and for you, right? I hear you agreeing with Stephen that it's not a watch, and also that Moore's law works, right, and continues to work, and you can make electronic devices smaller and smaller with more and more power over time. And as it turned out in the 1920s and 30s, that the best place to have your watch was not in your pocket, right? You could miniaturize it and put it on your wrist. That there's no reason over time to waste that real estate with sensors and transmitting devices and screens maybe that are in your ear, eye, under your skin, and that it may be that the traditional timekeeping piece and this electronic connected device actually diverge further rather than converge.
Okay, so Gary, what do you think Corona has shown us, if anything, about timepieces and what is unnecessary about how they're made and marketed now? I added the word marketed because back when the simple decision was from pocket to wrist, marketing wasn't a make or break, as much of a make or break as it is now.
Well, I think that what we talked about at the day of the panel is still true in terms of the evolution of timekeeping and the natural place to keep a device, right? So I think that today, Corona, no Corona, I'd still say science still advances, and eventually, and we're already seeing this to some extent, right? That the informational functionality, I'll call it, of something like an Apple Watch or a connected device can be anywhere, right? It could be in the corner of your eye, it could be, in your ear. And so in some ways it continues to free up real estate on the wrist for mechanical timepieces that actually give different benefits in terms of enjoyment, beauty, craftsmanship, the kind of stuff that well done mechanical watchmaking can deliver. Now, will that go faster or slower now that marketing is less in person, more remote, and people are depending on things like interaction of these kinds, right? Virtual interactions. It could be that in the intermediate term, right? What happens is, geez, I really would like to have a connected device on my wrist because I can talk with Dom on it, right? And we could do that, and there's more of an urgency about having those alternative functions really, really convenient to use. And so I think if anything, we might see that more people are saying, you know what, I was a holdout for a long time, but I'm actually going to get one of these things and I'm going to start wearing it. And then what I'm going to find is, well, they can't really put it in my eyeglasses or, a little chip in my eye yet for a while. And so maybe I'll just stick with that. So it could be a threat to mechanical timepieces, I think, in a way that maybe I hadn't fully recognized at the time of the panel.
Okay. Second, in what way could Moore's law, as you mentioned, work on watchmaking as a result of Corona?
That's there's a complex question. You're asking them today. Moore's law working on watchmaking in Corona. Well, I guess the thing that comes to mind is that, in olden times, right, and still to some extent today,
What's olden times? Sorry.
what's that?
What classifies now as olden times?
Well, in the, let's call it early 1900s to mid 1900s.
Okay.
That's pretty old. But watchmaking was highly specialized, right? You had these Swiss farmers up in the mountains. The pass would get snowed in, and the cows were downstairs staying indoors. And so what they did in the winter is, this guy made gears, and this guy made pivots, and over here there was a case maker, and it was highly specialized. And so they had, a learning curve, an experience curve, right? The precursor of Moore's law, where they got better and better and better. They could make better products faster, cheaper, because I was only making it. Sounds awfully boring to me, but okay. I'm making the same gear over and over and over again, and pretty soon it gets to be both pretty good, and I get to be really fast at making a high quality product. And maybe in an age of greater isolation, what we see is a resurgence of some of that, right? Where these niche specialists who can work on their own and really master their crafts are able to take a larger position because they get economies of larger production. Someone wrote to me the other day about independence and said, gee, it is a real problem that independent watchmakers, they make very few pieces. It's hard for them to get suppliers to supply them. Why don't they all go in together and have one watchmaker responsible for buying all the gears for 10 watchmakers, and one responsible for buying all the pivots, and one responsible, and so on, the hairsprings. And that could happen. I think my reservation about that is they call them independents for a reason. And they like operating on their own. And I know enough of them to know that, no offense, they're better watchmakers than business people, and they're really not logistics managers. So I think, could happen that there will be these buying consortiums that are formed, but I'd bet against that one, to be honest.
Like if you compare HYT to MBNF to Grubel Forcé, I feel like the discussions before a buying binge were to happen would be like, don't forget the, nano, whatever, dingly bob. And then the other one would say, no, our priority is actually the suspended balance wheel holders to prop them up,
Yeah, no, I mean, this is another big issue, of course, the uniqueness of parts, and that, I think we're talking about a cluster of independents who maybe are, less concerned with making their own in-house movements and willing to share. Again, I think it's a long shot. Now you're absolutely right, of course, that Stephen Forsey is not going to call up Edward Milon and say, hey, you got any gears over there. That's not going to happen.
Okay, let me play you your next. Okay, let's go.
It's a danger to me. So I think you speak compellingly about art and soul. Can any of you envision that at some point artificial intelligence will get to be so good and learn so quickly that it will make the job of the watch designer less important or obsolete?
Okay. Relative to the ongoing panic and chaos and rise in depression, rates that we're seeing or are being reported due to Corona, how would you answer your own question, Gary, now in this context?
Well, here's the good news, right? The good news is that if you're a designer of watches, say, right, and you're Eric Giroux, you can work on your own. So I think that it's not that difficult for really talented designers at the very high end of horology who are being hired to do these bespoke designs that are new to the world. they won't have a problem. I think, the question around can artificial intelligence get so good that it is able to replace the work of the designer? Well, in a world in which collaboration, especially in-person collaboration in a room, sketching things on sheets of paper or on the wall and saying, no, not that, it's the other thing, where that's much more difficult. You might well see that people are trying to improve these algorithm-based design models. Say, well, I'd like something that kind of looks like this, but make it different in the following way and see what you get. And for those who are not the very best or highly practiced, I should say, highly practiced industrial designers and watch aesthetic designers, that ability to generate multiple reps could actually enable them to do better than they've done in the past. I mean, my friends and I, when we consider commissioning a watch from an independent, I'll do these really awful Photoshop mock-ups, and I'll steal numerals from this watch and the color from that watch and paste it together, and it looks pretty bad. And I'm never going to get better, but there are people out there who will get better.
Practice makes perfect.
Well, make better anyway.
And what about the art and soul part versus convenience? Since earlier you even said, nowadays we're mostly online and we're mostly alone. So how would you say the art and soul factor, the art and soul that needs to be in a watch versus convenience in a watch in light of now, how would that play out?
Life is full of paradoxes, and going to one extreme often promotes the other. So, if anything, in an age of isolation, I think people seek meaning and connection. And so heart and soul, to me, it becomes more important, not less important. And having an object that really represents the personality, intention, ambitions of the creator, I think it becomes a more meaningful thing. And to have a piece that you see and love becomes a more meaningful thing. And so if anything, I think, to the extent that, and you asked about marketing earlier and retailing, to the extent that the marketers and retailers are able to transcend the limitations of these relatively cold digital media that we're all dealing with now, to really engage potential buyers in here's what's emotionally meaningful and engaging about this watch. People want that right now. Philips just had their first auction after a long break, and it went completely berserk. And those vintage watches, I think, to some extent, to some people, represent a link to a better time, and not in a nostalgic sense. Just these are classic, timeless pieces that represent the best of watchmaking in a lot of ways, or pieces that are recognized by a community to be important, and people really bid those things up. And I think some of it is that desire for a return to a more solid footing.
Like, what are examples of watches that you saw that made you feel that way? Not the nostalgia, but I guess comfort.
Yeah, I think I'm not a vintage Rolex person at all, but I think some of the vintage Rolexes where it's, hey, everyone loves these pieces, or my dad had one of these, or it's Rolex will always be Rolex. There were certain classic pieces, Patek 2497 that I tried to bid on, but got completely blown out. That is one of the classic perpetual calendar wristwatch references ever made, and they only made, I think, 187 of them, including the waterproof version. And so there aren't very many of them, and yet it's something that will always be important and treasured and valuable, and was beautifully made and will always remain beautifully made. And I think that those are some examples, but even things, and I'm trying to conjure up an example, but the less expensive pieces, maybe an IWC or Omega, where it's something that is recognized by a community of people who were enthusiastic about watches, and also has stood the test of time already.
That was it was actually really nice to hear that certain classics during this time of Corona, Philips came out with this auction, and during this time where everyone's isolated, that was a source of comfort for watch lovers like you during a time of isolation. That's pretty cool.
Well, actually, I actually happened to have, I just had it out. I wasn't planning to show it, but this is the Patek reference 1526 in rose gold. It was the first ever perpetual calendar wristwatch of which more than one was made. First ever serially produced.
This is the first ever one that was made.
The first ever perpetual calendar wristwatch made in series by Patek Philippe. And both Patek Philippe made it. It's the first ever. If you wanted a perpetual calendar wristwatch, and you didn't commission a unique piece, this was the first one ever made. And they launched it in 1943, still during the war. So it was a kind of a bold thing for them to make this kind of a complicated watch. But this is a watch I've been wearing a lot, actually, the past weeks. It's this one's almost 70 years old, and it just makes me feel good. So to your point, right? There's just something reassuring about looking down and seeing that certain things do endure even in very difficult times.
Oh, that's so cool. Thanks actually for sharing that. Thank you. Thanks, Gary. Now let me play the final moment. Okay, let's go.
For a good while to come.
Do you see the whole idea that the mechanical watch is unconnected? Is that a future virtue that people say, well, I don't like being on the grid, my wallet and my heart being uploaded 24 hours a day. Thank goodness for this old ticking thing that I happen to have on my wrist.
Okay, so now that Corona has shown us that we, humans and businesses alike, can and have to somewhat exist mainly online or on the grid for the unforeseeable future, how do you think watch buyers and collectors' buying patterns will be affected considering the points you just made?
Yeah, I think, again, I think, in an age of separation, we seek connection. And so, we've been forced off the grid in some ways, at least physically enough, that I think a lot of people, are, myself included, kind of tired of that, right? And so, maybe we don't see that trend, taking root quite so quickly as I would have imagined back at the forum, whereas, geez, I'm just kind of overwhelmed by being connected to things. I think two things. One, we're seeking connection in a time of separation, and also, many more people have gotten used to it, right? People who never used Zoom before, or my high school class has an upcoming reunion, and there are people there who have never been on a video connection of any kind.
Cool. So you're gonna have a Zoom high school reunion.
Yeah, and but one of the challenges is that a lot of the members of the class have no idea, right, how to do it. But they're learning, right? We're all learning, and so what you learn, you then practice. right? And I think the sort of the joy of isolation as a driver of the success of mechanical watches may not be as powerful as maybe I thought it was just a few months ago.
Okay, because there's also the perspective of too much online. A friend said, I have not socialized this much in so long because I make it a point to go on Zoom and connect in that way with people. So I thought maybe people would yearn for, that solitude, the solitude that comes with just being with yourself and art and appreciating a work of art, be it a mechanical watch or, having that moment of reflection, that cigarette you have alone with that work of art, whatever it is that you're just rolling around in your head.
Well, I think that's an excellent point. And I'll
not to like push yours aside, Gary.
No, no, but in terms of true confessions, right? The other day, I do keep a certain number of watches here at the house, and I took them out and I wound them and I set them. And actually, the reason that I have my perpetual calendar vintage piece out is that I hadn't worn it in a while, and I had to reset the dates. Right, so I took out all of my calendar watches and I reset all the dates and all the moon phases, and I just sat with them. And there are certain watches that are a joy to wind. The Dufour Simplicity, and the Lange watches. It just feels good, and so I think you make a great point, right? That if you're going to have these times of solitude, to really be able to enjoy something like a watch, a timepiece, the things that you have, and treasure them, and to say, gee, life was moving so fast that it would go months, and I'd never even see some of these things. But now, I think I will sit for an hour and just look at this darn thing, and isn't it great? So I think you make a really good point.
Well, spoken like a true watch collector. That was it. That's everything.
Great.
But, yeah, thank you so much for your time. I want to thank you for getting personal and genuine in that, because it helps me, people like me, actually feel that vicariously.
It's I'm always fond to say, right? It's all about the people, right? There are watches involved, but it's all about the people and connecting with friends and other enthusiasts, and just being honest and forthright about what we love about these objects and their makers, and why, and just I don't know. It's just something that for whatever reason, it brings me joy too, I guess, is the short version. And so thanks very much for asking me to join you.
No, I'm an orchestrator. So I'm just here to orchestrate connecting you with those other lovers and people who want to, become lovers and of watches and either art, and, just to connect you all together. Thank you so much, Gary. And thank you for your insight and your wisdom. Thank you for participating in Orology Forum Throwback 2019. And I hope you keep safe and sanitized during these times.
Thanks so much.